1. SHERYL TILLINGHAST. SHERYL TILLINGHAST, age 17, disappeared from Wassaic, New York on September 24, 1973. SHERYL had lived with her mother and several siblings in a mobile home. She was a caretaker to her younger siblings, as their mother struggled with alcoholism and was reportedly abusive. She had a strained relationship with her mother, but by all accounts, adored her siblings. At some point, SHERYL was detained by police for marijuana possession, and was sent to a reform school. Following a fire at the reform school, she was transferred to Wassaic State School, which was a combination of a mental institution and a boarding school for delinquent youth. Once SHERYL completed her required stay at the school, she accepted employment at the school, working in the laundry. She lived in an apartment nearby. During the time that SHERYL was employed there, she had remained in contact with her family. She had even contacted law enforcement in her hometown, and requested they do a welfare check on her siblings, as she was concerned for their safety. She also wrote a letter to one of her siblings just prior to her disappearance. She had stated in the letter that she had gotten a car, and had discussed plans for both of them to move to California. She also said she planned to come home to visit for her mother's upcoming birthday. Her family contacted the school when her mother's birthday came and went with no word from SHERYL. Her mother was told by the school that SHERYL was an adult, and that she didn't want to come home. Due to the strained relationship, her mother accepted this explanation, and though hurt, she did not pursue it any further at the time. SHERYL was not officially reported missing as a result. In the ensuing years, SHERYL's mother died, and her siblings began trying to figure out what had happened to SHERYL. They learned that no report had been filed. Investigation into her disappearance revealed that SHERYL likely had a boyfriend who also worked at Wassaic State School. It is believed that there was domestic abuse involved in their relationship, as a counselor at the school reported that she had seen bruises on SHERYL. No one is 100% certain of who SHERYL's boyfriend was, but her family has a strong suspicion of who it was, and this person is deceased. SHERYL left her last 2 paychecks behind, as well as all of her belongings. It doesn't appear that her car was found, although there is some question as to whether the car actually existed. Wassaic State School is now closed, and as far as I can tell, the site is not currently occupied. There is much speculation that she never left the school, but I think an assumption has been made by many that she lived on the grounds, and I believe she did not. She only worked there at the time of her disappearance. Is anyone out there a former student or employee of this school? Were you there in the 1970s? Do you remember anything about SHERYL? Her family really needs answers. Her mother died in 1996, but siblings are still searching for her. Foul play is suspected in SHERYL's disappearance, which remains unsolved. 2. Tammy Akers and Angela Rader. Tammy and her friend, Angela Rader, were dropped off at William Ruffner Junior High School by one of the girls' relatives on February 7, 1977 in Roanoke, Virginia. The girls did not attend classes that day and were last seen hitchhiking in the city. Neither girl has been heard from again. Angela and Tammy had run away together several times before their disappearances in 1977. The police originally did not take their disappearances seriously as a result. Several months after their disappearances, one of the girls' mothers got a phone call from someone saying she was her daughter and was alright. Tammy and Angela were also allegedly seen in a grocery store in the months after they vanished, but that sighting was never confirmed. The girls' mothers told authorities that Tammy and Angela worked for a friend of their families, Earl Conrad Bramblett, in 1977. A photo of Bramblett is posted with this case summary. Tammy's mother stated that her daughter was friends with Bramblett and his wife at the time, frequently spending time at their home. He did not seem to have any adult friends, just children. Investigators believe that Bramblett may have been involved in Tammy and Angela's disappearances. He reportedly told friends at a party in 1980 that he wished he did not hurt Tammy back in 1977. Bramblett was charged with molesting a 10-year-old girl in 1984, but acquitted. Tammy's older sister says he molested her when she was 12 years old, and she believes he molested Tammy as well. Bramblett convicted of murdering a Virginia family of 4, Blaine and Teresa Hodges and their 2 children, in 1994 and sentenced to death. He was living with the Hodges family at the time of their homicides. A jailhouse informant told police that Bramblett had told him that he killed the Hodges family after being caught molesting one of the children. The informant later recanted his statements, but Bramblett was executed in April 2003, still maintaining his innocence. It's worth noting that Bramblett has many supporters, particularly online, who believe he was wrongly accused. The same people maintain that both Tammy and Angela ran away from Roanoke voluntarily in 1977. 8 months after Bramblett was sent to death row, authorities dug up the yard of the house he had been living in when Tammy and Angela disappeared. They found nothing, and the residence's current owners did not give them permission to search inside the house. So they never had the opportunity to look in the basement where they believed Tammy and Angela may be buried. Bramblett always maintained his innocence in the missing girls' cases. He said he was drunk when he made the statement about hurting Tammy in 1980, and his comment was misinterpreted. He said he believes Tammy died in a bonfire in Central Florida in 1980, and the police know about it and have tried to cover it up. There is no evidence to support Bramblett's theory. However, authorities never charged Bramblett in connection with the girls' disappearances. They have taken blood samples from the girls' mothers, so if their bodies are found, and their family members are all dead, the bodies can still be identified from DNA. Angela's mother has since died. She believed her daughter was still alive. Tammy's family believes she is deceased, and Bramblett was connected to her disappearance. Tammy's and Angela's cases remain open and unsolved. 3. Cynthia Sumpter. More than 40 years have passed since Cynthia Lynn Sumpter vanished without a trace. But her mother, Linda Hayes, hasn't given up hope that her only child will be found alive. And neither have the San Jose Police Department, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I pray every day that God will bring her back into my life sometime here on this earth, not just in heaven, that I can hold her one more time, tell her how much I love her. Hayes, 67. Tearfully told this newspaper in a phone interview from her home in Oakley, Idaho. Cynthia was last seen playing outside her San Jose apartment complex at 990 Elm Street, near where Interstate 880 goes under the Alameda, on April 27, 1974. She was 5 years old. Hayes said she went to get sandwiches for lunch and asked a neighbor to stay in their unit in case Cynthia, barefoot and dressed in a red and white striped sleeveless shirt with a blue star on the front and purple pants, came home. When Cynthia didn't return, Hayes searched the neighborhood on her own for 30 minutes. Then police assembled a 50-member task force to find the little girl. Dozens of leads were followed. Several suspects were considered, but Cynthia remained missing as days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months, and months turned to years, then decades. Of the police department's 44 missing persons cold cases, Cynthia's is the oldest. Just because we didn't solve it doesn't mean the personnel at that time didn't put in the effort, said Sergeant Enrique Garcia. It looks like there was a lot of effort put in by a lot of investigators. Garcia said the police department's missing persons unit is gearing up to take a fresh look at the case, including possibly reanalyzing evidence, and is asking members of the public to come forward with any information they might have about Cynthia's disappearance. We have solved other cold open cases as a result of people coming forward, he said. We can't do it all by ourselves. We need the cooperative effort of the media, the public, law enforcement, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Robert G. Lowry Jr. of the National Center agreed that the public has a critical role to play. Even after this many years, someone out there has information that can be helpful to the San Jose police, said Lowry, vice president of the Alexandria, Virginia-based agency's Missing Children Division. Lowry said hope for Cynthia's safe return isn't misplaced. He pointed to J.C. Lee Dugard, who was rescued in 2009 after being held captive 18 years in the backyard of an Antioch home. I point to that case as a reminder not to give up on our children until we know for certain what has happened. And in this particular case, with Cynthia, we don't know what happened, Lowry said. We can't always assume the worst has happened until we have evidence to lead us in that direction. He continued, we won't close this case until she's been physically found. Cynthia's case predated the National Center's founding by a decade and the advent of Amber Alert, sex offender registries, and social media, all of which have helped increase the solve rate of missing children cases from 66% in 1984 to 98% today, Lowry said. Albeit there are tragedies involved with that, but most children are found and returned home, he said. If Cynthia had gone missing today, there would be a plethora of resources to find her and get her back to a safe place. The agency is using one of those resources in its search for her, an age-progressed photograph that shows what Cynthia might look like today at the age of 47. They are created once every 5 years for such cases, and the latest one was released in March. Leads are still trickling in after all these years. Lowry said the National Center received word of a possible sighting in 2014, and Garcia said the police department tested DNA from a person who thought she might be Cynthia in 2013. On the 42nd anniversary of her daughter's disappearance, Hayes is holding on to her hope as tightly as she ever has. Until they find a body and they can prove to me my daughter is dead, I will always have hope, she said, her words dissolving into a strangled sob. I will always keep looking for her. 4. Pamela Neal. Pamela Lynn Neal was born on July 18, 1960, and graduated from Cherry Creek High School in 1978. After high school, she attended Western State College at Gunnison before heading to Alaska for a year, where she photographed the wilderness. After Alaska, she went to Maine with her parents, and returned to Colorado a short time later where she landed a bank teller job with Key Savings and Loan, 3501 South Broadway in Englewood. On March 31, 1983, Pamela left work on a lunch break at 1:30 p.m. and walked 2 blocks east to another bank to cash a check. She took out several $100s, and stuffed the wad of money into her coat pocket. Afterwards, she stopped at a Safeway grocery store where she bought a lottery ticket, a pack of Winston cigarettes, and a delicatessen lunch. Pamela walked to her 3rd-floor apartment at 9 Hamden Avenue, which was across the street from Key Savings and Loan, to eat her lunch before heading back to work. She did not own a car. When Pamela did not return to work, her co-worker and roommate Darlene Hines called the apartment at 2:30 p.m. When there was no answer, Darlene walked to the apartment. Darlene later told police that she saw Pamela walking towards their apartment. Pamela was also seen by one other witness. When Darlene arrived, the entrance door was ajar. Darlene called her boss, who then called police. Police arrived at the apartment and also found the entrance door ajar. When they walked in, Pamela's lunch, a piece of fried chicken and a macaroni and cheese side dish, sitting in an unopened bag on the coffee table. Pamela's shoes were under the coffee table and her keys were on the floor. She usually tossed the keys onto a chair. The lottery ticket she purchased at Safeway was still inside her wallet in her purse, which was next to the coffee table. Pamela had not scratched off the lottery ticket, and the unopened pack of Winstons and another half a pack were left behind. There were no signs of a struggle, however all signs pointed toward an abduction. Neighbors did not see or hear anything unusual, and a thorough search of her apartment turned up no evidence into her disappearance. Despite a massive search and investigation into Pamela's abduction, she was never found. However, her case is listed as a homicide, not a missing persons case. Pamela Lynn Neal was described at the time of her disappearance as 5'4" tall, weighing 105 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. A couple theories emerged into Pamela's disappearance. The main one is that someone followed Pamela into her apartment, kidnapped her, and then forced the young woman down 2 flights of stairs. The other theory is that Pamela ran down to get her mail and someone grabbed her there. Englewood attacks. 9 months after Pamela's disappearance, 17-year-old Melissa Lou Chase was found beaten to death under a bridge in Englewood on December 8, 1983. Her live-in boyfriend was the one who found her body. He was never named in news reports. The last time Melissa had been seen alive was around 5:30 p.m. the night before, after she finished her shift at Phillips 66 service station at Union Avenue and Broadway. 3 years before Pamela disappeared, 21-year-old Helene Pruszinski was found murdered on January 18, 1980. She was nude below the waist, and her hands were bound behind her back. She had been raped repeatedly and stabbed 9 times in her back. Pruszinski had established a pattern in which she would leave work at the radio station at 16th and Broadway in Denver and catch a bus at around 6:10 p.m. at Broadway and 14th Avenue. She would ride south until she got off at South Broadway and Union Avenue. Mitchell. Like Helene, Melissa was found nude below the waist, although there was no evidence of sexual assault. Melissa had also disappeared the night before her body was found. 2 weeks before Helene was murdered, another young girl had been sexually assaulted, after getting off a bus on South Broadway. In March 1968, Constance Marie Paris, 18, had also been attacked, sexually assaulted and strangled. She went missing after getting off a bus at South Broadway and Girard Avenue. Her body was found days later in southwest Denver. The main suspect in Helene's case is Kenyon Battles Tollerton. He is currently incarcerated for the 1993 rape and murder of a 14-year-old. He was considered a person of interest in Pamela's case until investigators discovered he had been in prison for another crime at the time of her disappearance. NEAL is missing under suspicious circumstances and foul play is suspected in her disappearance. Few details are available in her case. 5. Sandra Butler. In 1978, 16-year-old Sandra K. Butler was living with her mother in an apartment at 4th and Greenbrier Sparks. She'd moved here from California and was attending Reed High School. June 23. Her mother left for work. She got a call later that day from Sandra asking permission to ride her bike to the Reno Rodeo. Her mother said yes and never saw Sandra again. Sandra was listed as a missing person, possibly a runaway, though those who knew her would dispute that possibility. Over the years, the case was handed through a succession of officers, typically those new to the Detectives Division at the Sparks Police Department. In 2007 it was assigned to Ken Gallup. Something about the case set a hook in the rookie detective. I have 2 daughters and I can't imagine that one of them would go missing, and I would never know what happened to them, he says. I took it personally. There wasn't a good deal to work with. Today's protocol in the case of a missing child is much different. Today we'd throw resources at it right away. We'd want to canvass that neighborhood. We want to talk with people. We want to search and look in those places where the child was last seen, use the media, disseminate all this information. Back then none of that happened. Information which might have been gathered, leads that might have been developed were not. Gallup has been able to update the foundation of the case. Her family's DNA is now in the national database as are better dental records, but he also needs help from those who remember the Sparks of 1978, and might remember her. Stories like this are his best chance of reaching those people and getting them to come forward. Somebody who went to school with her, somebody who hung out with her or rode bikes with her. Sparks was a different community back then, smaller. The kind of place where it wouldn't have been unusual for a young teenager to ride her bike across town through neighborhoods on her way to the fairgrounds. There were nearby, even across the street at the Greenbrier Bowling Alley and Shopping Center, places where kids of her age often gathered. She might have been known there, even stopped there that day. It's routine for an investigator to look here and elsewhere at other cases looking for common patterns, and inevitably, that leads to a frightening possibility. Serial murderers Gerald Gallego and his wife Charlene were known to have been in the area around that time and, at least once, had trolled the fairgrounds for young victims. There were 2 people who were victimized around that same time that he was held responsible for. Gallego was convicted of murders of 14-year-old Brenda Judd and 13-year-old Sandra Colley, and others in California in what came to be known as the sex slave murders. He died of rectal cancer awaiting his execution. His wife turned state's evidence and served a 16-year sentence, and is now living in California under a new name. Gallup has been unable to interview her, but he continues to pursue that possibility and a host of others. He's not passing this case on to the next guy and, he says, it's important that it continue. It is our obligation, not only as a police department, but as a community to get some answers for this family. They don't know what happened to their daughter. There has been no trace of Sandra since her disappearance in 1978. She was a student at Reed High School. She had moved to Nevada with her family from California. She had 6. Corinne Groenenberg. Corinne Groenenberg went missing from Modesto, California on November 1, 1973. She was last seen as she left her home and began walking. A family friend followed her until she reached the highway, where she was seen hitchhiking, and ultimately getting into a blue or green truck with a male driver. There is some confusion as to her age. NAMA states that she was 16, while a Modesto Bee article says she was 14. I'm inclined to go with the newspaper article, since the information was more than likely supplied by her parents. Plus, I think she looks closer to 14 in her photo. I couldn't find a birth record to eliminate any doubts, though. It appears she wasn't born in California. The family had moved to Modesto from Southern California a few months earlier prior to her disappearance. There is really no information in articles or online case files that give any indication of what her intentions may have been. However, a couple things lead me to speculate that she may have been having problems at the time of her disappearance. One is pretty obvious. She was 14, and transplanted in a new city, away from everything she knew. Nama states she was last seen at 12:29 p.m. November 1, 1973 was a Thursday. For some reason, it appears she wasn't at school. Why does a family friend follow her as she walks to the highway? If it were out of fear for her safety, why watch as she gets into a truck with an unknown male? And why not follow the truck? Did Corinne get picked up immediately as she approached the highway? Or did the friend sit in his or her car, waiting until she got a ride? I'd guess there was a reason, some sort of circumstance that caused the friend to be concerned. Her family seems to believe she's alive. They moved back to Southern California shortly after Corinne's disappearance, but have continued to own Corinne's childhood home, although they don't live there, thinking she may go back there at some point. It would help to know if Corinne was having problems, if she told anyone where she was going, or if she was homesick for Southern California. Did she take anything with her when she walked away from the home? I stumbled across this unsolved homicide, which occurred in Modesto, on July 16, 1975. The body of Donna Joanne Peoples, age 17, was found in a grape vineyard near Mays Boulevard and Dakota Avenue in West Modesto. It was believed that she was killed elsewhere and disposed of in the vineyard. The articles on this homicide do not indicate when or how she died. It is known that the day she went missing, she had been out with friends, and told them she was going on a date with a man named Lex. I have no reason to think these two cases are connected, but still thought it was worth mentioning, in case Corinne had mentioned a Lex, or perhaps knew Donna. There has been some speculation that Donna may have been a Zodiac victim, but no evidence of that theory. There is another missing persons case from Modesto, of Sylvia Stanley, who also reportedly got into a blue or green truck, but this was in 1986. Probably not the same truck 13 years later, but more likely a strange coincidence. Sylvia Stanley is thought to be a possible speed-freak killer's victim. There's really no way for me to lean toward one theory or another in this case. There are no unidentified females listed in namas from Stanislaus County. I'd sure like to know what was going on with Corinne in the days and hours leading up to her disappearance. I hope she ran away and has found happiness somewhere. 7. Trudy Appleby. Trudy Appleby is still 11 years old to those who knew her, even though she would now be in her 30s. That's because this Sunday, Trudy will have been missing for 20 years. There isn't really a day she isn't thought of in our minds. Amber Holderfield, a close childhood friend of Trudy's, told Dateline she'd be in her 30s now. There is so much she didn't get to do. What happened to Trudy continues to tear at the hearts of Amber and her mother Kelly Carlson, and they've made a vow to never give up searching for answers, no matter how few clues there are out there. It was a hot August in Moline, Illinois in 1996. Trudy was just 2 weeks shy of her 12th birthday. The spirited, quick-witted brunette was in a good mood the afternoon of August 20th. She was going to be free after being grounded for a few weeks, as she was nearly every summer afternoon. Before she was grounded, that is, Trudy was at the Carlson house. She was a staple in this house. She called me her mom number 2, remembers Kelly. The Carlson house was roughly a block from Trudy's father home, where the young girl lived with him and an older half-brother. Her mother also lived nearby, but her parents were separated. It was a safe, quiet area. Trudy, Amber and other neighborhood kids would roam the blocks surrounding their homes. It was a different time than it is now. The girls spent August 20th rollerblading in front of the Carlsons' home, then ate some hot dogs and mac and cheese. It was around 8 p.m. when Amber, 13 at the time, walked Trudy home to her driveway. It was nearly impossible to see Trudy's home from the road as the family's driveway wound between two other houses, and crossed a small ravine before arriving at the house. We made plans to hang out again the next day and that was it. Nothing unusual or strange, Amber told Dateline. It was summer vacation, and I slept through my alarm the next day. When I finally got up, I rang over to her house, but no one answered. When Trudy's father returned home from work for lunch on August 21st, a normal routine for him, Trudy wasn't there. That was not too alarming, though, since Trudy spent the majority of her time out and about with friends. It was before the age of cell phones. When she still wasn't there that evening, he began to worry. He called over here and asked if Trudy was here or had been here. Kelly said, "I told him no, that we hadn't seen her." Amber told Dateline that immediately after her mother hung up the phone with Trudy's father, she knew something was very wrong. "I was like, someone took her," said Amber. The police were called, but authorities weren't certain something sinister had occurred. Perhaps Trudy was off with a different friend or simply ran away. She'd be back soon. Kelly remembers an officer telling her, "It was frustrating that it took a few days for them to get it. We don't know what would have happened if they had jumped on it right then," Kelly said. Shortly after Trudy vanished, Amber told detectives her friend had recently been saying she was talking to an older boy. At the time, she thought Trudy was making up the story to make a neighborhood boy who had a crush on her jealous. "I wish I would have asked more questions about it when she said it. That still affects me greatly to this day." A neighbor told police she believed she saw Trudy getting into a boxy, gray vehicle the morning she disappeared with a man in his early 20s with brown, curly hair. Authorities believe that was the last known sighting of her. Trudy's case fills nearly 6 file cabinets at the Moline Police Department. Interviews, witness statements and detective notes, organized in various fashions, have been gone through multiple times, but no one has been able to put the puzzle of Trudy's fate together. It's probably one of the biggest well-known cases in the Quad Cities, especially in cold cases, Detective Michael Griffin, of the Moline Police Department, told Dateline. "We get tips weekly about Trudy. Some of them are far-fetched, of course, but they come in." Griffin has been the lead investigator on Trudy's case since March of 2015. He was handed the case after receiving training in cold cases, specifically missing person cold cases. "Those are the kinds of cases that are hard to shake when off duty," he said. "You feel as year by year passes, hope dims a little. We've never found her, so technically it's still a missing persons case," said Griffin. "You feel for her family because having kids of my own, I know the panic when you lose track of them in the grocery store. Imagine how much that panic compounds over 20 years. There are a number of primary suspects, but none has cooperated with authorities. Several people have been questioned over the years. It's unclear what physical evidence, if any, has been recovered." When Trudy first vanished, neighbor Kelly Carlson made Trudy's mother a promise. It's one she intends to keep until she reaches the grave. "She was worried people would forget about Trudy," Kelly said. "But we won't let that happen. Never. I keep my promises." Tragically, Trudy's mother was hit and killed by a drunk driver in 2014. She died without knowing the fate of her only child. Trudy's grandmother also passed away that year. "I believe they got their answers as soon as they passed over, and that they are with Trudy now. That's a small comfort." Trudy would be turning 32 in a few weeks. Kelly and Amber believe she would have become a teacher, a nurse, or a veterinarian because she loved animals so much. As Amber grew up, she would stop by the mailbox at the start of Trudy's driveway before school, in the hope that Trudy would somehow be there waiting to go to school. Of course, she never was. Trudy's father still lives at that house. Amber now has children of her own. They all know who Trudy is. "I have one of the original flyers laminated and hanging in my house," said Amber. "My kids know why I'm so strict with them." Amber has also taken a course to become certified to help with official searches for the missing. It's all because of Trudy. There is a vigil this Sunday in Moline for Trudy. Kelly and Amber will be there, as they are every year. They hope this year will be the last time they have to gather like this. Someone out there knows exactly what happened. Get off your high horse and give Trudy's family closure. Little girls just don't go poof, said Kelly. 8. Deanna Michelle Merrifield. Deanna's family was having problems in 1990 and she was staying with her grandmother on Alamo Avenue in Killeen, Texas that summer. She had completed 7th grade at Manor Middle School, and was due to enter 8th grade at Fairway School in the fall. She and her grandmother stayed up late watching movies on the evening of July 21st. After her grandmother went to bed, Deanna sneaked out of the house and went to visit her fraternal twin sister, Rebecca, who lived with an uncle 2.5 miles away at the Oak Springs Trailer Park in the 500 block of Dimple Street. Rebecca says Deanna arrived at the trailer park at 3:30 a.m., riding in a brown or bronze four-door vehicle driven by two Caucasian or Hispanic men. Deanna knocked on the trailer window to wake up Rebecca, and the two girls talked for a while. Deanna left with the men in their vehicle after the girls' conversation woke up their uncle. She was never seen again. In 1992, Rebecca got a collect phone call from someone who identified herself as Deanna. She accepted the call, but by the time they connected, the caller had hung up. The call was traced to Horse Cave, Kentucky, but the caller has never been identified. Rebecca later discovered that the police in Hurst, Texas ran Deanna's name and date of birth through their computer at a traffic stop in 1995. Between 2000 and 2002, a relative from out of state said Deanna had visited and said she wanted to stay hidden. The relative stated Deanna had gotten several tattoos. This story has never been verified. Many agencies classify Deanna as a runaway. She took no belongings with her when she vanished. Her mother has since died, but her sister is searching for her. Rebecca describes her as a free spirit and a streetwise, rebellious teen. The girl's mother was an alcoholic and Deanna was reportedly sexually abused. She and her sister grew up in the homes of various relatives. She enjoyed music by Def Leppard, Whitesnake and Ozzy Osbourne. In 1990, Rebecca hopes Deanna is still alive and ran away to a better life. Her case remains unsolved.